What exactly is this change in structure from GST 1.0 to GST 2.0?
In different rates of VAT by various states. Even then you will have a lot of complexity. You will have, let's say, hundreds of rates for various goods. One good can have one rate of excise and one rate of VAT, and just that combination will produce 10 into 10 hundreds of rates.
Can you just tell us, let's look at the brighter side, the positive impacts of these new reforms?
Sir was talking about, so the number of slabs have been reduced, which will also increase the tax efficiency. So right now, this is a move towards tax efficiency. This is one. And that means the revenues of the government should increase over a period of time, though there may be some initial losses because of the reduction of GST rates.
The government has tried to bring an element of progressiveness in what's called inherently a regressive tax.
Average tax rate is going to get reduced to less than 10. So what we can see, average tax rate is reducing, and what we can see that the tax collection is increasing.
Hello and welcome to the Perspectives brought to you by Vision Eyes. My name is Chiranjeet Mishra and I welcome you all to today's panel discussion. Today we are here to discuss one of the significant policy changes in the last decade, which is the proposed GST 2.0 reforms. Now, since its launch in 2017, this GST or Goods and Services Tax has been a significant landmark in India's economic history. But today we are here to look forward to change in that structure, moving from GST 1.0 to GST 2.0. An era of simplification, that is what we're looking forward to, from this era of unification. And to navigate this complex landscape, today we have with us three eminent faculty members of Vision Eyes: Aditya sir, Sudhir sir, and Brijesh sir. Hello sir.
Hello.
Now let's begin this discussion with this very basic question, which is going to steer the rest of the discussion. What exactly is this change in structure from GST 1.0 to GST 2.0, and why at all did we feel the need to bring this change?
All right. So the change from GST 1 to GST 2, we must go back to before GST to understand why did we bring in GST, and then we start to understand why we need GST 2.0. So by now, I'm sure everybody would know about this, that we had multiple taxes at center and state level, indirect taxes I'm talking about, multiple taxes. And those taxes created what we may now simplistically call as a complex system, a very complex system. So every good would have, for example, a different rate of excise levied by center and would have different rates of VAT, as in sales tax, levied by states. So if you think about it, permutation and combinations, even if let's say we have got 10 rates of excise and 10 different rates of VAT by various states, even then you will have a lot of complexity. You will have, let's say, hundreds of rates for various goods. One good can have one rate of excise and one rate of VAT, and just that combination will produce 10 into 10 hundreds of rates. And this is I'm just talking about two taxes. We had around 21 taxes earlier, center and state combined. Excise, different kinds of excise, sales tax, again, different kinds, entry, octroi, multiple taxes. So there was no way that we knew about what kind of taxes were being levied. So that is why we moved to a simplified system of GST. But the point was, different goods have various taxes. You can't simply immediately change all the tax rate. Let's say there is some good that was being levied at effectively, let's say 22% of tax. Some good being levied at 9% of tax. Now, where do you put that good? If you end up having same system as earlier, having multiple taxes, then there's no effectively very less change in the system. So what the government did was to maintain as far as possible easiness of transition. It kind of looked at the current tax and put them in these 5 different tax slabs: 0%, 5%, 12, 18, 28 and 28 plus cess. So goods went into the closest tax slab they could have gone. We ended up simplifying the system a lot. We ended up, let's say, unifying the system, as we sometimes say, but still there were multiple tax slabs, hence some level of complexity still prevailed. So this step that we are taking now, it's a movement towards more unification with simplification. So now we are moving into a, broadly speaking, 2 tax slab structure, most goods which were, let's say, in 12% slab move to 5%, some from 18 move to 5 or some to 0. So now we have got two main slabs, 5% and 18%. Apart from that, we still have many goods that are 0% rated, some goods that are 40% rated. So that is the simplification aspect of this thing. At the same time, GST's achievements, if you look at them, so at one point before GST, we had the total amount of taxes that were being collected, indirect taxes, were quite less. Even in 2020, 2021, we were collecting around 1 lakh crore of tax per month, so around 11 to 12 lakh crore of taxes during the year. Today, the average tax we are collecting has gone up to 1.84 lakh crores, which around 22 lakh crore rupees per year. So see the tremendous rise in taxes that has been there. Why? Because of this simplification structure, we've been able to bring in a lot of informal economy into the formal taxation net. So GST had its own achievements. Now is the time to build over that and move towards more simplification by rationalizing the tax structure. So that is why the government has brought in these reforms.
Thank you, sir. Now, Sudhir sir, the next question is for you. Now, every time a reform comes, we're really uncertain about what it is going to have in it. So can you just tell us, let's look at the brighter side, the positive impacts of these new reforms. What are the impacts on an ordinary citizen and the economy in general?
So, Chiranjeet, actually, the reform has come up at the right time right now. So, earlier when GST was about to be framed, economists have suggested the government, why don't you come up with one nation, one tax, one rate? So, it would be more easier in terms of calculation also, and you can avoid discrepancies. So, as sir was talking about, so the number of slabs have been reduced, which will also increase the tax efficiency. So, right now, this is a move towards tax efficiency. This is one. And that means the revenues of the government should increase over a period of time, though there may be some initial losses because of the reduction of GST rates. So we can increase taxes by increasing the rate, which we should not be doing in a country like India, or widen the tax base, that is basically formalize the economy, as sir was talking about, or increase the tax efficiency. I put GST in this bracket of widening the base through formalization and increasing the tax efficiency. So government has worked out well in GST 2 with respect to these two aspects, the second one and the third one, that is the base and tax efficiency. So these two are very visible. And looking at the external situations right now, why I say that it is at the right time the move has come up is, of course, in 2018, Nirmala Sitharaman madam was talking about investment-led growth model. So where we will focus on private investments and exports. But the present scenario right now does not allow us to focus more on exports because of the global conditions or the tariffs and things like that. So it's very important for us to focus back on our strength, that is domestic consumption. And this domestic consumption is directly linked to the taxing system, especially GST. So right now, government's GST 2 will definitely boost consumption. The C part of our GDP calculation, that's very important. Why? Because the X part, that is the exports part right now, is going to be affected. So looking at from that perspective, C becomes very important right now. So government has shifted its focus from investment to consumption, we can say. Of course, investment, there is focus, but right now I have to focus more on consumption. So one is the consumption aspect, keeping that in mind. Yes, this reform is a fantastic reform right now. Second important observation, of course, government says 2 lakh crores is going to come into the hands of people because of the reduction of the slabs, the reduction of the tax rates, GST rates. And especially the middle class segment, like the motorcycles or the cars getting cheaper right now because of the reform right now. And one of the fantastic reform which we can see right now is the health insurance policies, which were in 18% slab are now in 0%, which is a very important reform because health is one important, out of the pocket expenditure is very high in India. So therefore, this is another important aspect. So looking at these things, one is for economic growth. This reform is very helpful right now. Second is consumption related aspect. That is another important aspect. Third is indirect taxes directly have an impact on cost push inflation. We call it as inflation basically. So if inflation is going to come down, ultimately the products are going to become cheaper, then RBI can have a better policy in terms of RBI might come up with reducing the rates so that it can further boost our economic growth, and which is getting affected because of the external factors right now. So keeping these things in mind right now, I think this is a fantastic reform. And one more important observation is these indirect taxes are regressive in nature, right? And government made it artificially progressive by coming up with slabs. So that artificially progressive because we call it as tax democracy. Necessities, let's put it in 0% slab so that poor people are protected. That regressive aspect is reduced. And rich people or the sin goods, we were putting it in 28, now we're talking about 40% slab. That's a very good move in a country like India. If along with consumption, you're looking at welfare aspect, you're trying to make these indirect taxes artificially progressive and efficient through the new structure which we have, that is the 5% and the 18% one. And most of the important things are put in 0% slab, especially health. That is again a good sign for poor people. So I believe that inclusive growth aspect is also taken care of as far as the policy is concerned.
Thank you, sir. It's a good point that the government has tried to bring an element of progressiveness in what's called inherently a regressive tax. Now, Brijesh sir, would you like to add something to what?
I want to add, yes. I want to add 2-3 things. First thing, why it is the right time. Like the economy is growing at a very faster pace. If we see this quarter's growth, that is more than 7%. It is like at the top if we compare with other same level economies, bigger economies. And also the condition of inflation, that is also very low. So that is why it is being said it is very right time to take this step. One more thing I want to add, what Aditya sir said and Ram sir said about the tax efficiency. Like what happened before GST and after GST. And what happens, the tax collection, it started increasing. So if we see the SBI report on it, where it is being mentioned that the average tax rate, which was before GST, it was more than 15-16%. But after GST, it was reduced to 15 or less than 15%. And after this 19 reform, it further reduced to 13-14%, even less than that. And after this 25 reform, what is going to happen? The tax rate, average tax rate, is going to get reduced to less than 10. So what we can see, average tax rate is reducing, and what we can see that the tax collection is increasing. Why? Because of the base, what sir has mentioned. And if we talk about the importance, like sir has already mentioned many important points. So if I add one thing, that the fiscal burden, it is going to get increased, but it is in short term. But in longer term, what we can see, we are going to get more revenue. We are going to have more fiscal balance because of the more base. And also second thing, that how we are going to have more base, more registration, more reporting because of ease of doing business. That is also a very important thing. And third thing, sir has already mentioned about inclusiveness. Like the rates on necessities have been reduced to 0. And on luxury items, it has been increased. So it makes us believe that we are becoming more progressive and more societal balance we can see in this reform. So that is what I want to add.
Thank you, sir. Now, sir, we have discussed the brighter side. Let's come to the few challenges associated with these reforms. The first and foremost is fiscal federalism. There is a fear or concern that some states or most of the states may actually undergo revenue loss. What is your take on that?
So regarding revenue loss, one it's certainly a political matter. There's nothing denying that fact. When GST was proposed, see, we have tried to simplify this system, taxation system, several times in past. In 2008-9, government tried to bring in GST, but then there was a lot of opposition from the then opposition, which is now in power, that we would not want to give away our taxation sovereignty. In fact, ironically, the person who was at the forefront was Mr. Modi himself, the current Prime Minister. So he was very vocal about that, no, we can't accept GST. One of the reasons was that in 2005, government had brought in VAT. So VAT through amendment to the constitution, you said that states are going to tax goods sold in their territory in a certain way. So naturally, states would feel that why is center impinging on our rights? So therefore, it's very difficult for states to accept another reform in form of GST again. But then in 2015, when government started to think about GST again, one aspect was you can't do this without states coming on board, and states were promised not a taxation sovereignty, but you simply the way of communication changes. So it's not that I'm going to take away your power, that you will lose your sovereignty and I will get all the rights. It's like we both are pooling our powers together so that we have entered into a better system. So one is way of communication. I have to make you compliant not by taking away your power, but by demonstrating to you that it is for good for both of us. And second, I give you an assurance that in case you face any revenue loss, I will compensate you for that loss. So for that, we had this compensation cess. But compensation cess itself created a problem in the sense you already had 5 slabs, 0, 5, 12, 18, 28, and then there was a cess over and above that 28 for most goods in 20, for some goods in 28 and some in 18 also, sin goods or let's say demerit goods as we call them. But then that creates problems of its own. Now you have even more taxes, slabs than what were desirable. But it was kind of a political promise or political way forward that, okay, please come on board. Let's try to develop a better system, not the perfect one, but a better one. And then gradually we are going to move towards more cohesive, more cooperative federal atmosphere. Originally, it was proposed for 5 years from 17 to 22. But till 2020, as in before COVID, there was no need for anybody to get any compensation because every state was earning more than 14% that was promised to them as GST compensation. But then came COVID. As a result of that, revenues got lost. Center argued that see, it is not a loss because of implementation of GST, rather loss because of COVID. So it's not that state आप पैसा lose कर रहे हो, हम भी तो पैसा lose कर रहे हैं. So it's not because of GST, it's because of something that is quote unquote act of God is a statement that was used. But still, because there was a loss of revenue, center said, okay, we are going to borrow money and compensate you from that borrowed money as well. So compensation cess continued. But now again, states fear that one, center has unilaterally announced that we are moving towards a two-slab structure. We were not taken on board. In the GST Council, okay, things have moved ahead, but still states feel that there is a unilateralism on part of the center. Then they also fear that what about the loss in revenue? So there is again going to be an argument about whether this loss in revenue is going to be on account of GST implementation or on account of GST reduction. So the Compensation Cess Act, it says on account of implementation. Now in last 8 years since GST was implemented, it is now well established that states have now become accustomed to, center and state both have now, system is functional system. So there is no, as in, there are frictions, but there is no as such problem in GST implementation. This one over here is rationalization of rates right now. So I would believe that going ahead, we are in for some political challenges. States would say something, center would argue in some other direction. So there is a political aspect to that. There will be some challenges regarding compensation. Center has said that compensation cess will go, but on some goods it will still remain. On sin goods, like let's say tobacco products, cigarette, BD, pan masala, all these things is still going to be there to repay the money that was borrowed by center during COVID. But yes, this will remain and there are challenges that lie ahead. One aspect that sirs mentioned was the loss of revenue. They are projecting that this time we are going to lose some revenue around 40,000 crore rupees. But going ahead, as sir rightly pointed out, that base will increase. So if base increases and we are able to collect more amount of taxes, should not be a problem in long term, but there's a problem certainly waiting in the shorter term.
Okay, sir. Now, Brijesh sir, would like to know your views. What your views are regarding this particular issue?
I also have the same view. What happens here, bigger states and smaller states. So smaller states, they can see that we are into losses because of these rate cuts. Bigger states, they can have cushion because their economy is bigger. So what can be done? These, like if we take the example of northeastern states. So for them, they can demand immediately we need to be compensated. So if government does so, it is well and good. But what sir has mentioned, in near future, these things will go fine. Because it is not the problem of implementation. Like because of GST, they're not in the losses. And no state would say that these rate cuts are not good for the country. So every state will come on the board. Like it is good for the consumers. So one thing is that, yes, smaller states, they can ask for compensation. Second point is, what about the administration? administrative and legal clarity. So there also we need to look for, like there are so many cases pending, like more than 40,000 cases are pending for these GST, input tax credits and other things. And also, what about like on 22nd September, it is going to apply. So what is going to happen about the old stocks? How the prices are going to get decided? What about the input tax credit adjustment? What about the credit notes? So on these things, government needs to be more clear. Otherwise, if everything goes fine, in near future, we are going to get benefit.
Okay, sir. Now, Ram Sudhir, sir, let's move beyond these tax rate cuts and all that, about the structural and administrative changes and how they're going to affect the businesses and the compliance related issues.
Okay, so especially one we can talk about is inverted duty structures. Okay, so the basic understanding of inverted duty structure is it was one important thing which discouraged manufacturing in India. The taxes on the raw materials or inputs was higher than the taxes on the finished goods, because of which we were more importing the finished goods from outside, and it was discouraging local manufacturing. This is what is inverted duty structure. We'll put the same perspective in GST. So in GST, it is like the taxes on the inputs is higher than the output, the taxes on the output. Now, this is again a problem. So government is very clear on this, that government is going to settle this issue. So this is one important aspect. That means inverted duty structure related issues are going to be settled, and that will enhance one tax compliance, and that will also benefit manufacturing. Okay, so that will promote manufacturing. So this is one important observation which we look at. But coming to certain administrative issues, if I look at the problems here, especially, so when I look at the problems here, one problem is, as sir was talking about, is the problem of input tax credit. Several health companies were saying, though you're putting it in the 0% slab, now whether these ITCs are going to be effective or not. So that creates a problem in them to pass on the benefits to the customer now. Now, whether these benefits are really going to be passed on to the customer or not, this is a very important aspect. So it's not just enough that you reduce the taxes. It's very important that you also have an overview on what is happening. Okay, so for example, if let's say customers are waiting not to buy products, expecting further rate cuts, let's say, then also the demand is not going to increase or the consumption is not going to increase. So government should be very careful on observing these things. Second important observation is, what about already unsold inventory or unsold stock which I have, which I've got it at earlier rates? Now, how am I going to price it? So is there a procedure for this? Now, this is a big challenge. Why? Because government is exactly not clear on this. So how am I going to do it as per the previous thing, or am I going to do it as per the new rates that are fixed by the government? Now, this again creates a kind of a discrepancy in the minds of the supplier also. So this is one more important observation. And then coming to states issues, like, of course, not only smaller states, but bigger states like Telangana is also saying like 7,000 crore will be our loss. Okay, and they say we are not being consulted. So here there are two things. There's something like a trust deficit, which we call it as. So trust here is like the rates have been decided without consulting us completely. This is one. Second is, there was some tussle between centers and states, especially with respect to the compensation cess during COVID, as sir was talking about. So now if this trust deficit is there, because of two reasons. One is that 48,000 crore revenue which center is talking about, and the states are also feeling that we'll lose revenue. Second is, this GST has to promote one, cooperative federalism, and two, competitive federalism. Now, is it that this cooperative federalism still remains when we are not consulted and the decision is taken unilaterally? It is, of course, the state's perspective. Of course, any big reform is very difficult to implement without problems. For example, when government has planned for GST, the first question which government was asked is, already demonetization was not so okay as expected. And do you think this reform works out? Then Arun Jaitley's reply was, if Indian economy, any reform that increases Indian economy by 1%, we are ready to take any kind of risk, though there may be initial tussles in implementation. So tussles will be there, but it all again comes down to how we implement it effectively. But these are problems. Yes, we agree that problems are there, but these problems have to be resolved if you want to implement it. And yes, if you want to see India as Viksit Bharat by 2047, then these reforms are definitely required.
Yes, sir. We should be optimistic. Now, Brijesh, sir, economy of a country goes hand in hand with society and environment. So I'd like to know from you the broader policy goals as to are there any interesting provisions in these reforms which take care of the social and environmental dimensions?
Okay, I'm coming to that. Before that, I want to add one more point that one important thing we have got, like the popcorns, all the kind of popcorns, they are at same rate, 5%. So that is what we have got. Coming to that question, that we are having some interesting reform points also. Like if we talk about sin goods. So we have one category that is high fat, sugar and salt foods. So experts, they have suggested that we should put these into the top category. Like if it is 40%, it must come under 40%. So that same like these tobacco products, so that we can have more tax collection and we can use them for health programs. Another thing is about the recycled products. So that comes under that circular economy. So that is also being suggested that what we say in this circular economy, these recycled products, they are charged at same rate at which we are charging the fresh products. So because of which what is happening, this recycling industry, it is going for informal. So they are not coming into this formal setup because the price is same, the tax is same. So if we want to have that industry under this formal setup, we need to reduce that tax rate. If we are doing this, we are going to unblock more than 1 lakh crore economy. So that is what some interesting facts with respect to this new reforms. So some experts, they have suggested it. So that's it, what I want to add.
Thank you, everyone. Now let's move to the next segment. So far we discussed everything that is on paper and you just shared your insights about the same. Let's look at the future. And let's begin with you, Sudhir sir. So what all needs to be done to make these reforms successful? And at the same time, we also would like to know about your vision about the GST reforms 3.0 or GST 3.0 reforms.
So first thing, of course, the reforms are good, but at the same time, what can be done is there are certain items still outside GST. For example, when we talk about petrol and alcohol, so there is still no consensus. And it is better that we increase the base of GST by reducing the exempted items. And in some states, for example, if petrol is not as part of GST, then the center is coming up with excise and states are coming up with the sales tax, which is a previous regime. And many cases, the tax crosses sometimes 35%, or in some states, it went above 40 also. Now, that's not a good sign when it comes to the taxes levied on these items which are essential. Okay, so that is one important aspect. Second is with respect to the compensation aspect. So the compensation aspect should be more transparent. Of course, it is transparent, but the state should also be taken into consideration. And so that the conflict between center and state should be reduced. So this is one more important aspect with then easy flow of ITC, input tax credit. Of course, the reforms talk about MSME support. For example, MSMEs, within 60 days, there is a compulsory guaranteed refund that has to be given to MSME. That's a fantastic reform. Now, this should be implemented efficiently because MSMEs are one of the most important entities for growth as well as inclusiveness along with employment opportunities. So this again comes up. That is again strengthening my manufacturing sector becomes very important. So taxes specific to MSMEs should be implemented very efficiently. So this is one more important area. So now actually talking about GST 3.0 is too early as of now. But what we can talk about is, of course, once these things are implemented efficiently and we have come to a certain level, then only we'll be able to understand exactly as to what are the lacunae, what are the problems. Okay, but exactly we are theoretically we're able to see, yes, certain taxes are exempted. We see that the states are protesting with respect to revenues. or input tax credit not being reached. These are clearly visible, but at the same time, exactly we can't say what could be my next reform, based on the current situation, because it's all about implementation of GST 2 right now, based on which we'll be deciding exactly what has to be done.
Brijesh sir, you take.
Any reform can become successful if all the stakeholders are taken into confidence. So if we talk about the stakeholders, we have states, we have business community, we have consumers. So if we talk about the states, so for that we need to have transparent dialogue. If center is having transparent dialogue with the states, and also they are coming up with new compensation formula, then what can happen, all the states and the center, they are coming together. So if it happens, there is no political rift, then what can happen, the outcomes, the impact, we can have greater. Otherwise, the impact can be diluted. The second thing is about the business. If we talk about, like sir was talking about MSMEs. So if we see in the past, many MSMEs, they were shut down. There were many reasons for that. But one thing is the compliance, the ease of doing business. We need to go after technology. We need to leverage technology. Less of paperwork, the kind of like what we see, like after GST reforms, what happened, we can see a term that is license Raj, GST inspectors. So they are harassing these business community, small scale business communities. So that must be taken care of. And different guidelines are there and it is being done. And also that refund guarantee of 60 days, that is also a very good initiative. So that like it's not like they are getting the refund after 60 days, 1 year, 2 years. So that is creating the problem of liquidity for the business community. The third thing is with respect to consumers. So consumers, if they realize that they are getting cheaper products, then they can have more confidence in the system, more trust they can have in the system. And also along with all these things, I want to add, like we had this income tax, direct tax reforms, then we have this indirect tax reform. If we add another T, that is tariff deals, then we are going to get more success for the economy.
Okay, sir. Aditya sir, you take.
My 2 cents would be a bit longer. I'll take a little bit of contrary take, but not completely contrary. And of course, I agree with what all sirs have said, but just give me some flexibility to give a longer answer. So please allow me that thing. See, for as far as I see GST, I don't think so that number of rates has ever been a problem. Let me play a little bit advocate for the government as to why did we have 5 tax rates? What are we doing with 2 tax rates now? Number of rates has never actually been a problem. See, it's simply you have to put in a system. Nobody was doing hand calculation ki ye 15%, ye 12%, ye 18%. You simply put, once you do it for all goods, as in whatever goods you are using or selling, you put that in system and it's then automatic after that. There is not much effort or complexity because of that. Where does complexity arise? As sir gave example of popcorn, our favorite example in GST. Think from government's perspective. You go to PVR to watch a movie, you buy a popcorn over there. So popcorn is taxed at, let's say 5%, it's taxed at 5%. So when PVR has to pay tax to the government, it will collect 5% from you, it will pay 5% to the government. Now some GST inspector comes up over there and says, see, you are selling caramelized popcorn. And it should be, the inspector is saying, says that it should be in 5%. It is caramelized, hence it comes under category of sweets. Sweets are taxed at 18, therefore you should have paid 18, 1. And because you have paid 5, you have evaded paying tax. So ye lo tumhari penalty, ye tumhare upar charge ban jayega. Now think from my as a peer's perspective, PVR's perspective. What is it that I am thinking? Yaar, ye 5% ka popcorn hai aur yahan pe bol raha 18% iske upar tax pay karna hai. So to clarify, to ensure that there is as less arbitrariness to an inspector's decision, गवर्नमेंट वुड देन हैव टू कम अप विद कि कैरेमलाइज्ड का ये, सॉल्टेड का ये और पॉपकॉर्न का ये, क्योंकि वो आपको आर्बिट्रीनेस इंस्पेक्टर की खत्म करनी है. सो जीएसटी रिफॉर्म्स एज लेमैन वी वुड ऑलवेज थिंक यहाँ कम रेट्स हैं तो अच्छा है, सिंप्लीफाइड सिस्टम है, बट इट इज़ फार मोर अबाउट रिफॉर्मिंग द एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन. So if administration, the people who are going to implement, so as sir rightly said, harassment of businessmen. I provide my services to somebody else pays tax to me on those services because I'm selling services, somebody else will pay tax, that person then sells it to somebody else. I have raised my invoice, government will come and collect tax from me, but the person who is supposed to pay tax to me is not yet raised that invoice to the government. So there is a mismatch that is coming in the system. That means either it is my mistake or the person's mistake. Ideally, there is nobody at mistake. Simply, it is because there is a cycle. I pay tax at one point, you give me tax when you sell the good, and hence there is some kind of mismatch. Inspector will come and will impose a tax, will impose a penalty upon either me or on you because there is some mismatch. कि भाई वो expect कर रहा है tax अभी पे किया जाएगा, मैं बोल रहा हूँ मैं बाद में पे करूँ क्योंकि मेरे को तो मिला ही नहीं है tax. तो जो इंस्पेक्टर वाला आस्पेक्ट है, GST registration becomes a very big problem, and I'm sure everybody would have seen a lot of examples. You register to get a GST number, your request will be denied again and again. It's like passport. आप पासपोर्ट के लिए अप्लाई करते हो, पुलिस वाला आएगा and would want you to let's say grease his palms, otherwise I will send a report that I did not find the person over here. So same thing with GST. So this inspector वाला element जो है, this is the bigger problem than number of rates. Rates के लिए there is a justification, as I said. Obviously we would want to move to lesser number of rates, but as sir absolutely correctly pointed out, it is more about inspectors. So GST 3.0 would have to be more about administrative reforms. There is a movement in that direction. So government has said, for example, if a small business is applying, it is necessary that the person has to be issued a GST number within a certain number of days. I think it's 60 days or something like that. आपको जितने 5, 10, 15, 60 जितने भी दिन है, I don't know about the number, इतने दिन में you will have to be given a registration number. And then if you're not given, then the inspector has to explain why was it not given. So now we are trying to take up that arbitrary power that was there. So in my opinion, a much bigger reform would be that. Of course, no reform, as sir pointed out, no reform can be done unilaterally by center. We are a very loud democracy, so as to say. So if center does something, states will definitely oppose. There will be some challenges. I think we are a mature democracy also to get over those challenges. But I think the bureaucratic red tapeism that is there, that is something that we have to be mindful of when we are doing the reforms in the future. That's my take on this.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, everyone. It was quite an engaging discussion. So, dear viewers, we hope you enjoyed it, and now you have enough content to write a good answer if such a question from GST section is ever asked in the next mains, or if you get qualified for the interview round. We'll keep coming up with more such interesting issues. Till then, wish you all the very best.